Hey, what is up guys, it's Modded Warfare here. Welcome back to another PS5 Jailbreak news update. We've got a ton of news topics to dive into here in this video, so let's go ahead and get straight into it. Starting with the elephant in the room, which is this new $50,000 HackerOne report from APO to PlayStation here. So $50,000 is an insane amount. That's the highest payout that is offered on HackerOne. You can see if we go to the policy section here, we've got $50,000 for PS4 and PS5 for a critical vulnerability. So typically, a new kernel exploit, like the kind of reports we get from the Flow, those are high severity reports. But this is a critical severity report, so something much more serious. So there's been a few people who have been doing some digging surrounding this. We got Al-Azif, who uncovered a DEF CON video here from the same hacker. So you can see here, DEF CON 31. Automatic exploitation of TLS certificate validation, and at the 30-minute mark he goes into PS5 stuff. So he shows doing this kind of vulnerability check on a PS5 game where he finds some bad TLS certificates that could be vulnerable and could be exploited. So it's likely that it has something to do with this. Now there is also the open source tool that is used for this by this same developer. I guess if any other developers want to try and find similar vulnerabilities using this or try to reproduce it in some way, then the tool is available here. Now, because this seems to be more of a network type of vulnerability, if it is, assuming it is a TLS vulnerability, which it seems likely to be, then it's more likely that this is seen as critical because potentially it could, in the worst cases, be used to maybe intrude on PlayStation Network's servers and perhaps access customer data, like that big scandal that happened to PSN back in 2011. So, something like that would definitely be seen as critical by Sony and award a much higher bounty than something like a PS4 or PS5 jailbreak would. So yeah, that's kind of like the main difference. The only thing is, with PlayStation Network, there is a separate bounty section for PlayStation Network that only nets up to $3,000. So if it was exclusively a PlayStation Network thing, then you think it would not receive a bounty as high as 50,000. But if it's being done through the console itself, through the PS4 or through the PS5, then I suppose it would then be classified as a PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 4 vulnerability that could net up to $50,000 if they could use a PS4 or PS5 to intrude on PlayStation's network, access their network, or access game servers to do cheats, then yeah, that could potentially be why it got such a high bounty. But generally, I'm not getting my hopes up for a release for this. I mean, hopefully it does get released. Obviously, I hope it gets disclosed. That would be great. But generally, unless it's a report from the Flow, I don't get my hopes up because the Flow seems to be the only one who is consistently requesting disclosure on his reports. Whereas other developers, a lot of them just do not request disclosure. Either that or it's possible they do request disclosure, but PlayStation can somehow refuse it. I'm not entirely sure how that works on HackerOne, but it seems like they don't request disclosure, and therefore a lot of these, vulnerabilities just remain private forever. So anyway, that's what we've got there with that report. Now, apparently there have been people in the scene who have already been contacting this developer and kind of bothering them, the kind of etaHEN people. So generally, I think it's always just best to leave these people alone. If they want to request disclosure, they will. If they don't, they won't. It is what it is. So moving on from etaHEN, we have a new etaHEN release from LightningMods. So there's been quite a few changes in this new build of etaHEN. So quite a lot of these things are bug fixes. I'm just going to dive into the new features that have been added. So one of them, of course, is support for firmware 4.0 and 4.02. So you can now use etaHEN on those firmware versions. So we now have support on etaHEN for all the jailbreakable firmwares, I believe, which is great. Beyond that, we also have updated game cheats by Illusion. So etaHEN now includes the latest cheats. If you enable that in the etaHEN config file, you need to actually go into the config file and enable the cheats if you want those to work. Otherwise, it will do the jailbreaking homebrew apps instead. We also have a Discord RPC option so that you can actually show on your Discord profile what games you're launching, what games you're playing on your jailbroken PS5. And the other big one, of course, is whitelisted Lappy's Explorer app. So Lappy released a test version of PS5 Xplorer, which is a port of the famous PS4 Explorer app, which is the most popular I think, homebrew app. It's got the most downloads in the homebrew store for the PS4, and he's now ported it over to PS5. But on its own, it only had access to the sandbox directory. But because it's now been whitelisted in etaHEN 1.4, that means that when you launch it, etaHEN will jailbreak the app, allowing it to access the full file system, so that Lappy's PS5 Xplorer will then have access to the root directory and have access to all of the files on your PS5's SSD. And this is great because we've not had local access to the PS5 file system so far. Previously, what you had to do was use FTP, which would require another device to connect to the PS5 remotely to access the file system. But now we actually have an app that will allow us to access all the files on our PS5 locally on the device itself without having to use another device to access it. So that is a huge benefit that we now have access to on the PS5. So awesome stuff right there. If you're unfamiliar with Lappy's PS4 Explorer, PS5 Explorer, you can check it out. It should be available in the homebrew store on the PS5 by the time this video goes out, hopefully. But yeah, anyway, that's etaHEN and PS5 Explorer. Now, we also have a new release of Itemzflow to go along with etaHEN 1.4, which also has a bunch of new features. So there's quite a few bug fixes in this new build, like, for example, fixing an issue that caused the game's first launch to take a while. Also some bug fixes to copying operations when copying games from like the USB to the hard drive. There was also an issue that was discovered with directory depth, which is why some games like Returnal would not work when you tried to, copy them from USB to the hard drive, because it would basically tap out at a certain number of, subdirectories. So it would only go, I think, 7 directories deep, and then any further than that, it would not copy. So that would cause a problem. And this was an issue on PS4 as well, but it was fixed with kernel patches, whereas on the PS5, we can't do kernel patches, but I believe the fix is probably implemented in etaHEN now, so it should be working now. Now, this fix only applies to Itemzflow for now, so PS5 Explorer will likely still have the directory depth issue, unless Lappy can figure out a similar fix. The game disc icon has also been added, so it will now show a spinning disc icon when you have a game disc inserted, so that you'll know what game you have inserted in the console. So another really useful option that's been added in this release is the PS5 app scan option, which will allow you to scan for all of your apps in one instead of having to add your game dumps one by one individually. So you can just hit the scan for apps option and it will scan the most common directories that you would have your game dumps in, like the data folder, the user folder, your M.2 storage, your USB storage, extended storage. It will search all of that for your game dumps and then add them all into Itemzflow instead of having to do them individually, which is really handy. Yeah, pretty handy option that's been added there. You no longer have to add them all one by one. There's also been some improvements to the NFS option, which I'll probably dive into in a separate video. So yeah, some pretty impressive stuff right there. So those are kind of the main changes that have been made so far in etaHEN and Itemzflow. And because etaHEN now supports 4.0 and 4.02, that means that, of course, Itemzflow will also now work on those firmwares too. Moving on to my last topic here for this video, we have got a release from DeathRGH. DeathRGH is back again. He kind of left the scene for a while, or wasn't really that active, but now you can see he has graced us with something pretty special here. So this is PS5 Cold War Elf Loader, and he shows an example here working on zombies in multiplayer. This has actually been released now, so you can now use this on your PS5 to basically inject an elf file onto the game. Now, apparently he created this custom elf loader on PS4 and has just ported it over to PS5 because there's supposed to be an elf loader built into PS5 debug, but unfortunately it doesn't appear to be working at the moment. So DeathRGH decided to port his own elf loader over. And yeah, so he also mentions that this could be ported to other Call of Duty games. And with this kind of example video that he shows here, he shows that he's able to, use the in-game renderer to draw boxes around the enemies and basically create a basic kind of aimbot. So yeah, pretty cool stuff right there from DeathRGH. Download links will be linked in the video description. So yeah, anyway, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one.